call this meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good evening. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council members Gearboss, CO, McClellan, Mitchell, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and Councilwoman Dillon. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Police Chief Hart, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Wygowski, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, DPW Director Fordyce, and I believe that is it. The rest of you here in the audience this evening, we welcome you and we encourage you to sign in the back to my left. You can also find copies of the agenda on the back table. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. There are a few changes this evening. Item 19-58, textile traffic circle agreement with Washtenaw County is being removed. Mr. Campbell and I discussed this matter earlier in the day. No one from the Washtenaw County Road Commission was able to attend tonight's meeting, and I believe it's imperative that they attend and present. Well, they're the petitioners, so they need to present on their own behalf. So that item will be removed and will likely return at our next meeting on November 4th or later. And then a final discussion item after automatic annexation proposal with Saline Township. I'd like to add our comprehensive sidewalk program and receive an update from DPW Director Fordyce.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Dillon to approve the agenda as amended, and seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. And I do have a question on 1958, if you could ask the county. And other people have asked, did Lodi Township pay anything extra for the roundabouts that they have on Saline Ann Arbor Road, or I think Wagner Road? That's one question that was asked. The other one is the 19199 water tower painting. I noticed it was very inexpensive, and it appears that the reason it's $28,309 is to do a study for a study to have it done. And I was wondering when the water towers were painted last, and I understand the inside is cleaned out. When I was on council years ago, we had a company bring some goop and showed us what was on the inside. And before the iron removal plant, it was really bad, but it still gets very bad. I guess it's interesting that we have to have a study to give a contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there additional citizen comments? Please.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hermount. I live at 222 Monroe Street. Concerning the annexed sidewalk, I just would like to say I'm in support of it. I can see it would allow for less traffic to some of the festivals for the folks that live in the Huntington Woods subdivision, as well as safe walking to and from Huntington Woods from where we are. It'd be a nice connection to some of our friends that live in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. There are additional citizen comments on agenda items. Please.
Oh, sorry. Hello, Mary Ellen Mulcrum from Saline District Library. I wanted to thank you, Mayor Morrow, for the proclamation in recognition of National Friends of Libraries Week. And I also wanted to just say a few things about the Friends of Saline District Library. We're just so grateful for all that they do. And people may not realize some of those things. They do all the jobs necessary to keep the Friends Corner Bookshop running. And the earnings from that support the library. A number of things, such as some of our online resources, the Books for Babies program, and many other things. They also spend their time, these wonderful volunteers, spend their time advocating for the library and making sure that people know about the library. Just last week, Mayor Pro Tem Terhar volunteered at the Boo Bash and passed out a lot of coupons for free books at the corner bookshop. So anyway, I just want to say thank you very much to our friends. I'm not sure if there are any others here in the audience, but they're a great group of people, and the whole community should be grateful for the work that they do. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Appreciate your comments this evening. Additional comments, please.
Hi, my name's Ryan Harmount, and I live on 222 Monroe Street. I agree with the sidewalk that is being put in because I have friends at Huntington Woods that it would be easier to walk to and from my house to that neighborhood.
Very good. Appreciate your comments. I wouldn't have been able to stand up and say that at your age. Very well done. Please.
Good evening. My name's Callum Brown. I live at 628 Arlington Drive in Huntington Woods, Phase 2. I would also like to add my weight to the annexation of the sidewalk. And in fact, I'd like just to say that I was walking back on Friday night, about 10-ish, along around the bend, and actually the residents from Saline Township that live on the property that the sidewalk would cross actually stopped as they were arriving home from the evening just to make sure that we were all right because they thought it was unsafe. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items?
Hello there, my name is Bill Dix, and my family and I live at 436 Huntington Drive, also in Huntington Woods. And we just wanted to add our support for the extension of the sidewalk. So we moved here about a year ago from Chicago, and we used to, as a family, ride our bikes in and out of town and to different parks. And we'd really like to be able to do that now, like to get to Mill Pond Park or into town for lunch. And there's no real safe way to do that now coming around that bend, as people come around about 50. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is Jim Olzak. I live at 374 Huntington Drive. Regarding the sidewalk, I received an email from our president saying that potentially we may be responsible for the cost and maintenance and upkeep of the sidewalk, which kind of surprised me because this sidewalk, I believe, was supposed to be put in 2002. And I believe last year someone said that we would have it by the end of this year, which obviously it's not going to happen. So I'm not sure why we would be responsible for the sidewalk when the City Planning Commission approved this with Dave Shipman.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Stebbin. I live at 813 Newcastle Street in Saline, City of Saline, Huntington Woods, surprise. I'm a 14-year resident of Huntington Woods. If you look at my City of Saline taxes, that equates to roughly $168,000 that I've paid in city tax in my time living in this fine community. What I would say is I also serve in public office, and I want to thank you for the work that you do. I know it's hard, I know it's long hours, and I know that you give a lot of your time. I'd ask that you spend a little bit more time on getting the sidewalk put in. We're kind of getting hit at all sides of all directions with the Fairdine development, with the Andalina Farms runoff that's going to go into our creek, and the sidewalk, as my neighbor has said, that's supposed to be put in since 2002. Our president did send a contract and addendum around this afternoon. Mayor Marl, I think you were in on that email too. I would point out that it's unsigned by our Homeowners Association president, and I would just ask that you would respectfully give a little bit more time to this issue to resolve it in the name of safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dietz LaFleur. I'm a resident of Huntington Woods in Newcastle. I wanted to second what Jennifer said regarding the proposed obligation. There is no signed contract between the association and any other party regarding assuming that obligation. As it appears, the proposal was signed by one party only. I wanted to bring that to the council's attention, as Jennifer said, to take some consideration. Also had an open-ended question regarding whether or not there's any, as we stand here today, any impediments that would preclude us from moving forward with the, or preclude the city from moving forward with the construction of the sidewalk. And last, every child that's sitting in this room is a resident of Huntington Woods. Every child also owns a bike, and they ride every single day in Huntington Woods. But they're pretty much bound by Huntington Woods because, as Mr. Dix said, it's just unsafe to go around that corner. Every single day I drive from Huntington Woods to where the sidewalk begins and jog around the city of Saline. I love it. It's my city, I'm a resident here, pay city taxes, and I love driving, jogging around Saline. However, it's unsafe to jog around that bend. I've had many close calls throughout the years. I've been jogging for 5 straight years every single day. Would like to go from doorstep to doorstep. And I know the kids behind me would love to ride their bikes to school and ride in to Mill Pond Park and participate in all the city has to offer by taking advantage of our sidewalk and biking into town. I'd like for you to consider all these things as we sit here before you. And I have no further things to add. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is Griffin Weiss. I live on 365 Arlington Drive.
And I'm Gabriel Dix, and I live on 436 Huntington Drive. And I would like them to put in the new sidewalk because I have a friend who lives right by Pleasant Ridge, and I know the way to Pleasant Ridge, and it would be fun to ride bikes to his house if the sidewalk could be put in, but I know it's too dangerous to ride without the sidewalk.
And then I would like to have the sidewalk put in because I'm a teenager and I like to be with friends, I like to hang out, and I want to have a safe way to get to the city. And I would have had more freedom when we used to live in New York because in 5th grade they let you go in the heart of Manhattan. They let you go out for lunch for an hour, and I would just like the freedom to be able to go down safely and hang out with friends. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, boys. Very well spoken. Yep, you pull that down if you need to.
My name is Brady Weiss, and I live at 365 Arlington Drive in Huntington Woods.
And my name's Ryan Stebbin, and I live on 813 Newcastle Street.
I'd like the sidewalk put in because I have a friend who lives right near Mill Pond Park, and I'd really like to bike to his house, and it would be like better because it doesn't happen much because we can't because there's no sidewalk.
And I would also like the sidewalk put in because I also have a friend there, and I would like to bike to their house too.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your comments.
Did my time start when I walked from the?
No.
Okay. Michael Zabriskie, 822 Newcastle. I cannot claim that I could run like some of my neighbors can down that proposed sidewalk. However, having hiked that spot, it makes me really nervous. And also having children who like to ride their bikes, it would be nice to be able to do that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments, please?
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Gervin, and I live at 375 Huntington Drive. And I, too, am here tonight about the sidewalk. We moved into our house in 2006 and patiently waited while paying exorbitant taxes for this promised sidewalk. I sent Mayor Merle an email this summer that told him that I've had a common joke in my neighborhood that my son would be driving before that sidewalk was put in, and he did take driver's training this summer. So it's disappointing on my end. We probably will not have that use, but I certainly would like that use for my neighbors, and I'd like to be able to sell my home at some point and be able to say that we are connected. Furthermore, one item that I just need to say is that the speeding in Huntington Woods is outrageous. I've been passed on the left turning into my driveway. This is by primarily other residents. Coming up the speed limit, as many of my neighbors said, when you're trying to turn right into Huntington off Monroe, you're regularly passed on the left, usually with a blare of a horn and a finger being thrown at you. But in our own neighborhood, that's happening as well. And I believe this summer I had attempted to have a speed radar put in, and a neighbor objected because of the aesthetic. I believe that was a public easement issue. So I'm bringing my concerns together. It's not just the sidewalk, it's the overall safety and quality of living in that end of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? Please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Diane Cooper. I live at 515 Huntington Drive in the Huntington Woods subdivision. I am too commenting in support of the sidewalk. We moved here about a year ago from the state of Connecticut, where our taxes were also high, but our taxes are higher here. I have heard a lot of stories about this sidewalk and a lot of disappointing things, but I will say that I have a 3-year-old son, and we would like to make this our community, and we would like to be here for a very long time, and we would like to be able to use the downtown and to get there safely. I myself have walked to and from the downtown. I was with a group of friends one night coming home in the dark. My friend fell and could have been seriously injured. And just the other night, my husband was driving home from the airport at 10:30 at night, and as soon as he got home, commented to me that he was coming around the bend and there was an individual wearing a black shirt walking, and that if he would not have been paying attention, he could have easily hit that person. So it is a very serious safety issue. So please take that into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any additional comments on agenda items?
Yeah, my name is Jerry McCarty. I live at 322 Huntington Drive, and I'm also here to support the sidewalk project to connect our subdivision to the city. Again, I think it's, given our the tax that we're paying back in the sub, I think we are owed that by the city. I can't think of any other development that's not connected to the city off the top of my head by a sidewalk within the city limits. So I think we should prioritize this and get this done as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? We appreciate everyone's remarks, and we will visit the Huntington Woods connecting sidewalk as part of the discussion portion of our agenda. But at this time, unless there are additional comments, we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem to approve as submitted. Was that a second by Councilmember Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on now to new business item 19-194, GBA Sauk Business Trail Purchase Agreement Extension. This will be a motion, actually, let's start with a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 14, 2019 memo from City Attorney Tom Forshee.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan. Mr. Campbell, do you want to begin with remarks, and then I'll offer my colleagues, Councilwoman Dillon and Councilmember Gearbaugh, an opportunity to chat as well, because those two individuals, along with yourself and myself, met with GBA about a month ago to talk about this process and how best to move forward. And I'll also note for the public's benefit that there were some supplemental materials passed out earlier this evening, some visuals, and then a schematic layout on the flip side. So with that, Mr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Added to your information this evening at the dais, you see a site plan with some renderings. That was received that this morning from GBA in reference to this evening's meeting. I apologize, I'm looking out of the audience. I don't see a representative from GBA. Was expecting them, but I'm not sure where they're at. But Any case, so going forward, as Mayor Morrow alluded, we did meet with GBA and received an update of their work that they've been doing during the due diligence period for vetting development of Lot 20A in the Sauk Business Trail, Sauk Trail Business Park. What they've come back with is, as you can see, is this proposed site plan where they have the retail restaurant as well as a grocery store proposed, and they also have on the southern portion of the facility an assisted living, as well as also in the southwest corner of the property, medical facility that would provide support to the assisted living center. However, as they're trying to secure these tenants to go forward, and from our meeting that we had a month or so ago, the discussion was that they would need additional time. You may recall that they're currently in their additional 180-day extension of due diligence right now, and that will the end date for that is the first week of November. And so the idea was that they would request the short-term through December, this short-term extension through, I believe it's December 18th. And then during that time, they would be able to continue their due diligence and come back for conceivably a larger length of time, but be able to do some more work to determine how long of an extension of their due diligence that they would need. So that's what is before you this evening. If Mayor or any council members would like to expand on that.
The only thing that I would add to the comments that were made by our city manager is I thought we had a lively and robust discussion about a month ago with Mr. Caparisi and the gentleman from GBA. I am fully in support of granting this additional extension, but I do think it's absolutely critical, and this was communicated very directly to Matt at GBA and his colleagues, that they come and have a more thoughtful, in-depth, substantive discussion about their plans and to address questions and concerns that council members have. There are a few things that do concern me based on what was distributed or what was provided earlier today. One of the things that I've made a really strong emphasis on is avoiding the traditional strip mall development where you have nondescript buildings in the rear with seas of asphalt and concrete up front. And so their initial proposals had the buildings adjacent to the road with the landscaping and the structures hiding the parking. And I think that's a standard that we ought to be striving for. I often cite the Arbor Hills Shopping Center on Washtenaw as sort of the gold standard as it relates to this approach. But fully support an additional month extension, but do look forward to having a more substantive discussion with them, assuming this motion passes. Can I start with you, Mr. Gearbaugh? Anything you'd like to add? I know you weren't able to attend that meeting in person, but you did graciously participate via conference call.
Yeah, my only concern was part of it is it's a major change from what was originally proposed to us with the fact of the assisted living and so forth. So even though we want to extend it and we want to have this property be developed, it's the concern of how that will fit into that whole aspect. And I think this is a major change from what we anticipated before. But they need to come forward with a really, I think, more complete proposal, as you just stated. As a result of having assisted living and so much on there, that will have more demand on city services, requirements, and so forth. So it's a proposal that I think this council is going to have to seriously consider, but at least it's an attempt to try and sell this property. At this point, I don't know if we have any other potential buyers, so we need to move forward with what we have been presented.
Very good. Councilwoman Dillon, anything you'd like to add since you were also gracious enough to participate in that meeting?
Not much that I can add. I think Mr. Gearbaugh summed it up. We had discussed that it is quite a deviation from what we had originally anticipated the use of that property. And there is definitely a concern about the use of city services with assisted living, more police, fire, EMS type things, water usage. This would now be a residential facility versus retail. So I don't think it impacts the extension of their due diligence. This is still preliminary, and we had expressed that to them We did not, and I don't want to speak for others, I did not indicate that we were accepting this plan by any means. They are still exploring opportunities.
Very good. Questions for either Mr. Campbell or any members of the team that recently met with GBA and Associates? Councilwoman Mitchell and then Councilwoman McClellan.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess my first question is, I would also echo that this is a significant change, having an assisted living facility there. There's very small lettering. I believe it says 90 units, or is that 80, please?
Looks like an 80 to me.
80, okay. And I'm looking, it's hard because I haven't had time to compare these drawings to the original. It appears to me, without looking at it, at the original, that there's significantly more impermeable surfaces. There's much more parking. But that's a question I would like answered. Is our zoning, as it stands, does that allow to have an assisted living facility in the same area as a commercial development?
The short answer is yes, with the SPA 1 zoning.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Could you say that again?
SPA 1, that's the current zoning that is on those lots right there, those three, the front East Michigan Ave.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. What does our master plan say about this area? Does anyone recall? Is it commercial? Is it residential?
Well, it's been a business park, for several years, and recently, a handful of years ago, City Council, those three lots for the hotel, the car wash, and now this vacant lot, retail lot, were rezoned to more of a commercial opportunities. In addition, of course, there are some, like, for instance, the Gateway Plaza, those offices are commercial, so it's essentially been a business park mixture of industrial and some commercial.
I see, okay. Was there any information given, I think during the original proposal, this company proposed to extend a street between the shopping center. Is it the Oaks? I always forget the name of, where Matty J's and Ace, the Oaks is there now. So
Still on here.
It's highlighted on the rendering.
On the right-hand side, left-hand side, I'm sorry. No,
Between the food store and the medical professional building.
right where it says 21.
Oh, okay, so that is a service, that service drive, so that's still included?
Correct.
So I guess my concerns are this. When I back up and look at what that space is, I at this point, do not understand how an assisted living facility quite fits in. It might fit in with our zoning, and I'm also curious, with having a hotel there, it seems like having retail and restaurant and this food store mix, that seemed to make sense. So I guess I would need more information, but at this point, I don't like the fact that the assisted living center is there. Thank you.
Councilman McClellan, then I'll get Mr. Gearbaugh again.
Yeah, I guess I echo some of what my colleagues have said. I am intrigued that that they kind of took the lead suggestion that we kind of gave them about medical, perhaps working with IHA or having some kind of medical facility there. I think that's something that's needed in town, but I don't know that attaching it to assisted living is the proper way to go, and I really don't care for the rendering that's, if this is kind of what they're proposing. It looks like a hotel, it looks like a motel, so I really don't care. care for that personally. But I'm not opposed to the extension necessarily, but I do think that they have some hard work to do to get to where they want to be.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Gearbaugh, additional comments?
Yeah, just a little bit about the rationale for some of the proposals they were bringing forward. The idea of having the food store or another type grocery market or whatever, their rationing was that they needed more mixed development because the stores of that nature want to make sure they have people that will be coming to use it even in the vicinity. What surprised me a little was now it's clearly identified as assisted living. I'm not sure if that means, what type of assisted living. So the idea was that the growth and the combination would be a mixed development that would allow senior citizen living or those type of individuals to be able to walk closer to the food store and stuff like that. So their idea is to have more of a mixed development that's a little more the urbanized approach that they're looking at. But I agree, there were some concerns about that in terms of just understanding whether or not the assisted living would be completely taxable, because we're not supporting anything that's a tax-free enterprise in this type of property because of the city's investment. That's it.
Very good. Additional questions, comments? We have a motion on the floor, then moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan, to acknowledge receipt of the October 14th memo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion now to approve or not to approve the GBA Sauk Trail Business Purchase Agreement extension until December 18th, 2019, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor to sign?
Move to approve and authorize.
Moved by Dillon to approve and authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tahar. Discussion on the motion. Councilman McClellan and then Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Just for public's benefit, we are not approving any plans at this point. We're just approving the extension of the agreement to kind of work all those details out. Correct?
Correct. Yep. Thank you for sharing that. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, to echo what Ms. McClellan said, and to say I look forward to hearing more details about this. As Mr. Gearbock pointed out, assisted living, we need a whole lot more information about this possible residential unit. In my understanding of terminology, assisted living doesn't necessarily mean people walking over to the store and buying groceries. So that's just big question, but I am fully in support of giving this extension so that they can develop their ideas more and explain themselves.
Very good. Councilmember Seal.
Yes, sir. Just to go on record as stating, like my colleagues, that I am not enamored with the idea of an assisted living building of the size that they have there in this plan that they presented to us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Any additional comments? Councilwoman Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you give a quick rundown? So we're not, doing any approving and there's no final site plan. This is, a maybe. Can you give us like the next 3 or 4 steps in this process and when, where in that timeline that we might receive a more fleshed out proposal?
So what will likely happen, Mr. Campbell and/or myself will extend an invitation to the partners at GBA to present to City Council, likely at a work meeting at either our second meeting in November or our first meeting in December. As is my custom, I don't normally seek consensus at a work meeting, but the issue then would be revisited at the subsequent regular meeting. If there was consensus that it was still a plan and proposal worth pursuing, a longer due diligence extension period would be placed on a council agenda for consideration and adoption.
I see. Thank you so much.
Yep. Any additional comments? There is a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Tahar to approve. Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We move on to new business item 19-195, alternate closed point of dispensing. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 10th, 2019 memo from Police Chief Hart and to approve or not to approve the alternative closed point of dispensing POD agreement as submitted and to authorize or not authorize the mayor to sign.
Move to acknowledge.
And approve and authorize.
Oh, boy. We'll let CO be the mover to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize, and McClellan is the second. Chief Hart, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just outlined this closed or alternate point of dispensing agreement through Washtenaw County. What will allow us to do is receive medication or vaccinations in the case of a public health emergency. It would be all employees, elected officials, and those that are living in our household. And what that will allow us to do is allow us to kind of keep our mind at work and taking care of business here in our community versus worrying about a public health emergency and our loved ones at home. So kind of that continuity of government. In 2003, during the blackout, I was at work in my former community, working 18, 20 hours, and my family was home in the dark. So if this were something that were a health crisis, we would be able to ease our minds a little bit with our family being taken care of with medicine along with us and continue to provide that service. This would be something that our VIPs, our volunteers and public safety team, are very anxious to start, to practice. There's going to be some communication with Cindra James and the Washtenaw County Health Department. So it'll be a setup. There's kind of some, in your backup material, there's some proposed layouts, sign-in sheets, things along those lines. So I'm open for any questions.
Very good, Chief Hart. Questions for our police chief? Councilwoman Mitchell.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Chief. This is a really important public health idea to bring. And we hear about disaster preparedness, but I think you're making tangible moves towards preparing. Are we receiving any help from state or national funds for helping? You know, do we have a network? Are we working with the Washtenaw County Health folks, or what kind of partners do we have?
For this type of scenario, this is strictly an agreement with the Washtenaw County Health Department.
I see.
So this is just an agreement between us for the closed or I should say alternate or closed pod. It would be great to have an open one, you know, maybe some ways down the road, but then we're talking about a lot more security concerns, a lot more staff that are needed, and that way the public would be able to come in. The health department does have designated open sites that our citizens we would communicate through them through the emergency EAS system. So all that information would be shared with our citizens if something were to happen, and they were also to receive the medicines as well.
I see. I see. So this is kind of the equivalent of, you know, put your own oxygen mask on before
That's a great analogy.
helping your
yes.
passenger.
Yep.
Right. Okay. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Chief Hart. Councilwoman Dillon.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say thank you very much for your very concise memo.
Thank you.
That I like bullet points. And my only question was, will you have a designated area within the building that would be a full-time space? Or is it something that's a makeshift of, if we need it, we just clear out this room and we make it into a facility?
Yeah, I think that's something that's kind of always in flux. So if, let's say that you, as a policy body, needed to conduct business within this room, maybe we would move our closed pod down into our training center. So we would kind of, depending on what is going on, if you all as elected officials need to come in here and make decisions with some type of a disaster, then we could move that around. So it's not really set to one location. We're going to practice a couple different ones. Just to kind of get the flow down, because nothing ever goes as planned.
Thank you. And one other question, is the fire department or EMS services involved in this process, or is this strictly
It's just
police?
us.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Additional questions. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, so Chief, you've talked about the role of the VIPs, but I note also in your memo, and perhaps members of the public would like to hear about this, that the Washtenaw County Health Department would be supplying the medical staff. The volunteers in public safety are not going to be doing medical functions, right?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep. They're going to set up the framework. They're going to work with the health department and kind of the way the room's going to be set up, somebody to sign people in, handle any issues. Maybe it's someone from the community showed up and it was just for the employees. We would redirect them to the open source. So they're just kind of setting up the framework. The health department will supply the health professionals, they will supply the medicine, the vaccinations, anything that's needed. It's really a win-win for us, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And one last comment, if I may.
Please.
Thank you in this document, and then later we have another document where you ensured that the city's non-discrimination ordinance was referenced in the document. Thank you very much for keeping on top of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearba.
What other communities have this set up currently?
You know, I know that I had it at my previous community. I don't know about Washtenaw County. They must have been on some initiative. This is actually something I've been working on for probably a good 6 months, trying to coordinate between our legal and who's going to set it up. And our VIPS team really latched onto it, and they're very excited to lead the charge on this.
Okay. As you mentioned, this is strictly just to give immunizations and such to police and their families.
No, sir. It would be the city council, all city employees.
Okay.
Water department, DPW, all of the employees, elected officials, and those that live in their household.
Okay. But it would not the general public? So
But
you
not
said
the
it would
general
direct-
public,
okay.
yep.
I'm just asking those questions just from the perspective of how people will see that from that
Yeah,
standpoint.
and
And I understand the emergency staff because you want to have them out there saving people. Whether or not council's that ranked, I'm not so sure, but I understand the approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearba. Any additional questions for Chief Hart? Chief, thank you. Hold tight, though. I think you have a couple other items coming up on the agenda this evening. Is there any discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by McClellan, to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 19-196, tow contract. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 10th, 2019 memo from Police Chief Hart, and to approve or not to approve the 3-year contract with American One and No Bull Towing, and upon mutual consent of the City of Saline and each company, the contract may be renewed for 2 years in a 1-year increment at the same time and conditions of the original contract, and to authorize or not authorize the clerk and mayor to sign the agreements.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbuck to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Chief Hart, the floor is yours.
This is, our tow services contract has been on my wish list to take care of since I started here in December of 17. Just had an opportunity to assign this out to 2 staff members, had them look at contracts throughout Washtenaw County. Washtenaw County does have a contract with tow facilities, but it is several years old. Basically, the recommendation was that we raise the rates a certain percent. I believe it was 6 or 10% within the document, and then have a contract, put a contract out there, basically a reverse RFP. We set the prices, and if we have tow services companies that are interested, that have facilities within Saline, that we would honor those contracts. So that's what we're here tonight. I put some metrics in there. Not only was the bid put out, we did have our 2 local companies, No Bull and America One Towing. Both Bill and Chris are here in the audience tonight, just kind of observing from their business perspectives. We have a 25-minute response time that's built into the contract, and we'll have a monthly audit. And really what I'm seeking to do is add some transparency and accountability to a process that we initiate. Let's say that we have an accident on Michigan Avenue. We have vehicles that are disabled. Right now, it's handled kind of as a private tow, which is strange because we call the wrecker service, and then it's handled between the wrecker service and the vehicle owner or the motorist. There's no impound slip that's done. There's no inventory of a vehicle. It's just we've summoned the service there, but we have done nothing to protect the city, protect the motorist, or protect the tow company by inventorying all the items that are in there. There could be items of value, let's say, that are in there that could later allegedly be, reported stolen or what have you. So I'm just seeking some accountability in the system. I personally like the thought that we have 2 companies here within the city of Saline, and we're kind of keeping that business here. What does that do for us? It takes care of our businesses within Saline. They're meeting our prices, and people that have their vehicles towed, whether it's from an accident scene or from an arrest scene, they don't have to go far to go then and pick up their vehicle. So that is really the basis for the bids for the towing services.
This is a very good overview, Chief. Mr. Gula's in the back. I do want to acknowledge him. Chris, thank you for being here. The other gentleman you referenced, Chief? Oh, excellent.
Bill?
Thank you. Bill, thank you for being here. Questions for, well, I'll afford the petitioners. Do you care to make any comments, gentlemen? You don't need to, but if you'd like to, we would be happy to entertain those. No, you're good? Chris, you're good? Okay, excellent. Questions for the chief? Councilwoman Mitchell.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Chief, I was just looking at the paperwork, and I do ask your forgiveness. I was out of town. I took an initial swipe at the packet on Thursday and then had more time Sunday, and I did not write you this question, so I want to let the audience know that's on me. I did not write this question to the city staff ahead of time. I'm looking at page 17 of 20 in the agreement. It's page 340 of our electronic packet. So it's right after dispute resolution, GP 1.07, environmental condition of site, under item A. Do you want me to repeat any of that information? I would not.
Hold on one second, I'm trying to
Right.
sign in. I took my,
Oh, do you want me to show you? I mean, I have it.
if you could just,
Or do you want a
hopefully I'll
hard copy?
remember.
Oh,
Do you want a hard copy?
All right.
So is it in the initial contract, or is it the supporting documents?
it's page 340 of the packet. I'm really sorry, I could not tell you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It can't be 340, the packet is the very last page of the packet.
Oh, great, okay. Does that help, Chief?
It can't be page 340 though, is what we're saying, because page 340 is the last page of
Oh,
of
what
the
is,
packet.
right, but what does that say? This is why we are supposed to write it
Page
at a
17 of 20 of what you sent, Chief.
Heidi McClellan can find page numbers. Thank you, Heidi McClellan. I beg your pardon. So it's page 17 of 20. Does that help?
It's like around
Yes.
130, page 130, something like that, 136.
I don't know.
That's where the contract is.
Page 151.
I did not screenshot the proper page number, apparently.
All right. I'm getting there.
Okay. Do you want me to?
Page 9. You said it was page 17? All right.
Okay.
You said it was after governing law?
After dispute resolution, please. So it's GP 1.07. Page 17 of 20, environmental condition of site is item GP 1-07. Okay.
I can't find it, I
All right,
apologize.
here. Okay. I'm trying to get a bigger thing for you. So I'll read it. Would that be okay? Okay. So there's a question about the condition of site. So item A says, owner represents to Dixon that as of the effective date, to the best of the owner's knowledge, that there are no constituents of concern other than those disclosed in writing, that nothing exists or is adjacent to the site. So I wanted to check in with you about parking lots, because I think, I took a quick look at Google Maps. I think both of these companies have unpaved parking lots.
Yes.
And so I guess this is also a question for Mr. Campbell. What are the requirements? And forgive my ignorance. At some point, I thought we were supposed to not have gravel parking lots anymore. So I guess my question was from an environmental impact. According to this wording, is the fact that they have gravel parking lots, is that an environmental concern? Not concise tonight. Sorry. Does that make sense, Mr. Campbell?
So there are parking lots that are gravel that were grandfathered in.
Okay.
So they were gravelled prior to, so going forward. So there are some that are continue to be gravel that were prior to the city adopting that ordinance.
So, according to this language, is the fact that they're gravel rather than asphalt, is that an environmental concern?
I'm not aware, but if I could, could you cite that number, GP?
Oh, sure. I took a screenshot on my phone. GP 1.07. It follows the dispute resolution.
Yeah, that is actually in the, that's for the water tower painting.
Oh, that would be why. That would be why the chief couldn't get it. See, that's what happens when I travel and I have to read my packet on a phone. So I will ask that question, but maybe I could contact you, Mr. Campbell, and ask that gravel parking lot and just get clarity so that I understand businesses and how that works.
Mr. Gearbo, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can clarify. The one on the west side definitely was a grandfathered one. That's been there for decades. I would like to have it paved, but that was that issue. The one on Bennett Street, the recommendation from staff at the time, we granted the use permit for that property. We discussed it, and I believe it can be reviewed in the future. There was a concern that if you were to go in there and start ripping that lot up and everything, because of the previous types of businesses and other aspects that have been there, you might open a huge can of worms. So we left it as is. There was no consistency with the idea that there was going to be a long-term storage type situation there, where wrecked cars weren't supposed to be sitting there for days on end or weeks, so that, you know, potential fluids and things like that. The idea was that they were just going to store the cars there for a couple days and then get them out of there quickly. So it was more of a very minimal short-term type storage, not a long-term storage.
I see. That offers clarity.
So
Thank you
it
so
was
much.
considered and talked about at council, at planning commission, and then the idea was that as it's looked at, it may be considered in the future.
I see. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, and I
That's okay.
apologize, Chief. Thank you.
Additional questions for the chief, Councilwoman Dillon?
Thank you. Chief, thank you so much, by the way, for delegating this task to your staff. I think it's great to have your staff involved in these processes.
Thank you.
And I do have a question. So this is a two-party contract. So if one party were not able to fulfill their obligations for any reason, does that, at any point during contract, so would we only use one, or would we rebid it to get a second contractor?
I would, at that point, just go with the one,
Okay,
yep, versus rebidding.
okay. And then I have one other really quick question. As far as like vehicle storage, and it talks about days of the week, Sundays and holidays are optional. So does the meter still run on those days if the facility isn't available to people? Is that like a normal
It
course of
does.
business?
It does. I feel comfortable in my interviews with both business owners that they will make every accommodation that they can for folks. They've been very good to work with, at least American One has in the past. This would be a new relationship with Noble, but he has someone that lives right down the street from the facility that would be able to handle those releases.
No problem. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that it is local, having had to go get a car that was towed outside of the area. It does become a hassle, especially when you don't have a vehicle to go get your vehicle. So I think that was the only other question I had, so thank you very much.
Additional questions for the chief? There's a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge. So if there's nothing further, we'll move, or we'll proceed to vote on the motion moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge receipt of the October 10th memo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion now to approve or not to approve, and to authorize or not authorize?
Move to authorize and approve.
Move to
Second.
approve and authorize by Mr. Gearbow, and that's seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. Discussion on the motion. Appreciate your work on this, Chief, and gentlemen, we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. We'll proceed to vote then. All those in favor of the motion to approve and authorize signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Chief, you got one more.
One more.
New business item 19-197, law enforcement service contract. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 14th, 2019 memo from Police Chief Hart and to approve or not to approve the attached agreement authorizing the Chief of Police to enter into such agreements as necessary for public safety and to authorize or not authorize the police chief as the approver due to the emergent nature of some requests.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbox to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Chief Hart, the floor is yours.
In my experience over 28 years of law enforcement, there are times where a private entity reaches out to their local law enforcement department and wants kind of specific directed police on their facility for whatever reason. Sometimes it's somebody that's met the threshold of making threats or violence at the workplace, threats of violence at the workplace. Sometimes it could be a new movie that's being released that there are some concerns about, and the theater wants us to be on site. It's very difficult, you know, for most police agencies, and it's really kind of unfair to pull resources away from the general patrols of the public to redirect them towards one site, simply for a crime prevention type of duty. So it's really good to have these law enforcement services contracts at the ready. It's something that's been vetted through our legal team, Dickinson Wright. We did add some language in there. Our NDO was added, and some other vernacular, some terms were changed by Dickinson Wright. But really, it's a great contract to have. It would be used very sparingly. I know that you're putting a lot of trust in me to not just go out and approve all these different contracts with private facilities. In my 20 months here, there's been one occasion that I can think of, and it's been recent, which kind of prompted my thought process on this and not having a contract here to kind of prompt us to kind of take a look at this contract. But like I say, just one time in 20 months, it's good to kind of lay the ground rules, know what they are ahead of time, work with the Treasurer's office to make sure that you know, all of our costs are captured and what we would contract with these businesses.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the overview. Are there questions for Police Chief Hart? Mr. Gearbaugh? No? Mr. Seal, we'll start with you.
Good evening, Chief. At what point do we cross over from providing a government service that's normally expected of the police department to privately contracting for specific kinds of enforcement action?
And I missed the first part. Is at what point?
At what point do we cross over from being a normally expected service from the police department to it being an extraordinary?
I think a good example would be, let's say, our residents here from Huntington Woods. When we go in and we provide traffic enforcement, speeders, some of the things that we heard about tonight, the passing in the subdivision and that is kind of a general public concern that one would have versus a business that may have someone, like I say, that's kind of raised a concern of bringing violence to the workplace, because at some point that may be a public police concern if we have to go there now with more resources in an emergent situation to deal with. One way or another, we could deal with it. If we can deal with it on the front end through a private contract to simply provide those services versus having to respond to something tragic that took place, I think that's kind of the separation for me is when we sit down and look at it. Certainly wouldn't use it for, let's say, the strike recently at Phoenicia. We would not provide security, you know, for the plant. That would not be a very good use of our resources at the police department. So I don't know if that fully answered your question or not.
I guess it does. It's a new concept to me, one that we had never engaged in before, and I just was wondering where the crossover was.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to kind of quantify. I guess I could share in my previous community, we used it quite a bit at 12 Oaks Mall around Christmas time. Imagine Theaters every Friday and Saturday night. I still think contracts with my former agency. So the companies are willing to pay for the service.
The officers are still in uniform?
They're still in uniform. They still are under our control, our policies, our procedures.
Okay.
Yep.
Nothing further, Mr. Seal?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman McClellan?
Are you aware, I recall that Pittsfield Township does this with Rave, or what used to be Rave Theater, whatever it's called now. Years ago, when I worked there in high school and college, they had a contract with Pittsfield Township police officers that were there on weekend evenings, most every shift on the weekend. So I don't know if you have knowledge of whether Pittsfield Township is doing this with other
I did not reach out
businesses
to
and-
Director Harshberger. I know it's a accreditation standard as well, moving forward, as we've kind of discussed in some strategic planning sessions, maybe moving forward 2021. So it's something that I don't think is very uncommon for law enforcement. And again, I think it's that special, dedicated side of law enforcement that we normally don't provide on a day-to-day basis, that kind of separates a contracted service versus just general patrol.
Yeah, it seemed to me like they were there, on their off hours, and but I don't recall. I mean, it's a long time ago. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Previously this week, I'd asked some questions of the chief and city manager just to answer some of the concerns. Of course, one of them was, how would this impact any of our contracts that we have with the officers? And I believe the indication about overtime, and one of my concerns is that, how do you manage that, and what do you do, and the impact if you have somebody working a whole weekend and all of a sudden we have an emergency situation somewhere else, what does that play in? And then the other part of it was just liability and those kind of concerns. I do believe you were going to provide some kind of reporting to us or some kind of acknowledgement, if you could explain that or whatever you would.
Yeah,
list.
so we would follow the guidelines in the collective bargaining agreement as far as recall. If something were to take off in the community, let's say our situation at Mill Pond Park and I needed staff in, this contract allows us to pull those staff out of any contracted positions that they may be in to take care of a much larger public safety issue at hand. And then also, if you approve this, I owe you some accountability. So in my monthly report, if we happen to enter into an agreement such as this, then that would be something that I would put into my monthly report, is which business, how many hours, how many staff members, things along those lines.
And with regards with liability and so forth, how is that treated in terms of, how did our attorneys look at it?
It's just the same as if an officer was on duty at work. Okay. So we're responsible for them. There is some indemnification language that's in there, but I think at the end of the day, it's the deepest pockets that wins.
Right,
So,
that's what I assumed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and then I think Councilwoman Dillon had some questions.
Yes, Chief, you mentioned something just briefly about this relating to accreditation standards. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the Michigan Law Enforcement Association Accreditation Group has different standards that they require, just like there is for how we handle money, how we conduct ourselves on traffic stops, what our facilities are, who can go where in our facilities. This just happens to be one of those accreditation standards. It talks about that secondary or law enforcement services contract.
So they provide like a framework within which this would fit, or?
Yes, it is a
guide-
standard that we would have to either meet or say that we don't engage in at all.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Dillon?
Thank you. So you mentioned the word security, and so, I'm thinking security guards. So where does this lie for a business owner? That, do they feel as though it's more official to have actual officers versus security? Is there a cost difference to them? What I'm afraid of is that once we put this out there, it's going to turn into rent-a-cop.
Sure.
And like every business is going to be like, well, I want you for this, I want you for that. And your once in a blue moon is going to be an every weekend thing at various locations. Because they feel like they're getting more value in having an actual officer versus a security guard.
Sure. I think the difference is the arrest powers. So if there was a police officer there and something were to happen, they would have those arrest powers above and beyond a citizen's arrest powers. As far as putting it out there, I mean, other than being on the agenda, and maybe if somebody did call and it was approved, people sharing the word, this is really just more for us to have a foundation, guidelines to follow in the event that we did want to grant that. There are many times where in my previous community, we said, no, this is really a role for a security company, and then we would give them some suggestions on who to reach out to in the security field. So it's really kind of it's a judgment call. And again, I realize that you're putting a lot of trust in me on this. It's not something that we're just going to enter into to get some officers some overtime.
Right. So thank you for bringing that up, because that was the next thing I was going to ask, is that you do have right of refusal.
Yes.
And you can say, no, I don't feel as though this is worthy of police. And, or if there's a timing issue where you're short-staffed to begin with, we're not obligated to provide someone.
Correct.
Okay.
A lot of time I'll be in his office, leaning on him a little bit, city manager, if it's
And-
not an urgent issue.
So then my last question is, what will your policy be as far as officers? I think Mr. Gearbaugh may have touched on this in his question. Is this a seniority? Is it first come? Is it a rotating thing? Because, if there is an opportunity for overtime, I'd like to make sure that it's available to all of the officers.
Right. And right now, the contract, the way it reads, the collective bargaining agreement with the police officers is an equalization of overtime. So it's a very complex look that a sergeant has to do. They have to see who, has the most overtime, who hasn't had overtime in a while. We look at which officers are on their pass day. So today is actually somebody's Saturday, and tomorrow is their Sunday, based on how their days off fall. So it really is kind of a complex 15, 20 minutes that go into trying to figure out who is up next for the overtime. It would not be on a strict seniority basis, but this is something that I would really like to work on in 2020 in one of our next contracts that are coming up.
Okay.
We spend a lot of time on that very issue.
I appreciate that. And then my last question is probably for Mr. Campbell. And I think Mr. Gearbaugh also touched upon this in his communication, which is, where do you feel this is going to land as far as additional benefits for employees? Because their overtime provides additional opportunities for them.
Correct. Exactly. It would be just like any other overtime. So as they accumulate that, their FAC, their final average compensation, their last 3 years, it certainly could impact that.
Right.
But just like any other overtime opportunity.
So that's where I do have one concern, is that, the city's kind of taking on that burden side of it, of, the longevity cost. And so I would be very mindful of how it's used in that regard.
Oh, absolutely, and I believe Chief Hart also mentioned earlier, we'll be working with Treasurer's Office, Finance to establish, to get that cost, so it does cover the city's overhead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief.
Any additional questions for the chief or the city manager? And I'll refer back to our motion. We have a motion on the floor moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion now to approve or not to approve and to authorize or not authorize?
Move to approve and authorize.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell, and I'll let Mr. Gearbaugh be the second to that. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. CO. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Gearbaugh.
I think this is a good attempt to try and approach your concern with doing this. I mean, we can always adjust it or remove it if we need to. We have to face the fact we're a larger city now, and I think there are some events and things that this type of safety is a preemptive way to protect our citizens. And if a business wants to cover that cost, it benefits us to some point. I do agree with the others that it be used sparingly and that it be really the type of situation where we would run into a difficult problem if we had to be called in as a last-minute type approach. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have a lot of reserves and some other folks that really step up in our time of need. So we'll be looking at all of those options before I were to sign this.
Thank you.
Additional comments? No, then there's a motion on the floor, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Gearbaugh, to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Chief, thank you very much. We move on now to new business item 19-198, proposed ordinance number 815, non-discrimination ordinance amendment. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the proposed ordinance number 815 and to approve or not to approve the ordinance amending sections 46-8 of chapter 46 of the Saline City Code to clarify applicability of vaccinations and immunizations by adding a new exemption and authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize.
Second?
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Seal. Okay. I guess I'll just reiterate the comments that I made at the last meeting. As many of you recall, this issue came about via a request from one of our residents and business owners. I then had a follow-up phone conversation with Tom Forsey and Roger Sweats regarding the issue. The amendment was drafted. I then provided a copy of the amendment as a courtesy to Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, council members Gearbaugh and Mitchell, who served on the non-discrimination work group. It was distributed at the last meeting, and now it's appearing before you for your consideration. If there are no questions or discussion on the motion, Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. Just to clarify on this, this is allowing the refusal
Correct.
of admittance. So is there a privacy issue with this in that you're going to have proof of vaccination or unvaccination in order to participate?
I can.
Oh, can you address that?
Yeah, so for HIPAA, that is to make sure that nobody can access your health information without your consent. So in order to, for daycare or something, it's an accepted thing that vaccination records are required. So by voluntarily, when they sign the application, they agree to give that record. So that's how that privacy issue is handled.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
That does make sense.
Okay.
That was a perfect answer.
And I just wanted to ask if our facilities would be utilizing this.
That's a good question. I guess the only applicable facility would be the recreation center. And Director Scruggs, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but have you or your staff considered this issue at all, or is it something that you would consider and perhaps report back in the future?
You're correct. You put me on the spot.
I did.
I don't want to be the vaccination police.
Okay.
That's a preference from parents, beliefs or whatnot. We really haven't had any need to,
So it's not something you'd be pursuing at this time? Okay. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Dillon?
So just to clarify then, if the city is not going to pursue it, but will allow businesses to pursue it, are we sort of talking out both sides of our mouth on this issue?
I don't see it that way because I think, well, it's not an issue of thinking, it's an issue of knowing that all this amendment does is permit businesses or enterprises to screen for vaccination and immunization. So I think it provides the opportunity, the choice. So I don't see it as, personally, I don't see it as a dichotomy.
Thank you.
Yep. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, thank you. Just to continue along this line, when the mayor shared the draft with the members of the working group on the NDO, I did ask some questions, which then were answered. I believe everyone was copied on this. And one of my questions was how this interacts with state and county rules. And the answer that I got back, presumably this came from the attorneys, is that this amendment, all this amendment pertains to is how the city enforces the NDO. It does not, there's no stance on vaccination, yes, vaccination, no, whether or not you can restrict. It's just about that the city's NDO does not apply to that decision on the part of the business or the rec center or any other group. And that if there were any conflict, though there doesn't appear to be, as I understood the response I got, was that the county or the state law would supersede ours if it were in conflict. But this is really just about whether or not the city would enforce the NDO about this topic.
That's good clarification. Thank you. Councilman McClellan?
I'm assuming that lawyers have been talked about
They drafted
this.
this.
Right, but no, that's not where I was going with it. But does this open any doors to, okay, well, this issue, I'm going to get an exemption. What about this issue? What about this issue? You know what I mean? Does it open any or set any precedent for somebody else that has some other thing that they say, hey, I want to exempt this?
I think that's an excellent question, and I'll let I'll provide my perspective, and then if Mayor Pro Tem Tahar or council members Gearbaugh or Mitchell as members of the NDO working group would like to chime in, I would welcome that. But I was very cognizant of that issue when this request first came up, because I would not support changing in spirit or substance our non-discrimination ordinance. I think many individuals worked very hard on this. It's mainly a symbolic gesture, but a very important one. And so I do not want to be setting a precedent where we continually revise and alter sections of the NDO. However, when looking at this request specifically, I found it to be rather innocuous. That's why we discussed it with the attorney and then provided it to the members of the NDO working committee for their thoughts and perspectives.
I understand that, and it's I get that this issue is innocuous and that, you know, the specific business and the specific reasoning for why they want an exemption for this makes sense. But in my mind, it's like, are you starting to open that door to, well, you know, here's the precedent for this time, you know, there was a real need and a real reason, why not this one? That's just my concern, and I think it's been addressed, and I don't have issue with this particular one, but.
And I get that, and I think for the most part I agree with it. I think I would reiterate back to my previous point. Policies, ordinances, rules, they do change, they do evolve in time. As long as we're not altering the substance of the NDO, then I'm comfortable moving forward with an amendment. Councilwoman Mitchell?
I really appreciate that thought, because we just don't, you know, I think Ms. Scruggs said, you know, I don't want to be the police. And I think it's a real danger that government can become over-involved. From my viewpoint, this is a protection for a business owner to set whatever rules she or he wants on their property. If it's a business, you know, for example, like a dance studio, where there's a lot of contact, you know, people in close quarters, and they want to have a vaccination requirement, this protects that business. And there may be businesses, you know, like tutoring. I don't imagine there's a lot of contact sport in tutoring. They may not need a vaccination requirement. So from my view, this protects that individual right to operate a business while being protected against someone who doesn't agree with that. So.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Thank you for that, Councilwoman Mitchell. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion on the floor, moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO, to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the last action item of the evening, which is new business item 19-199, water tower painting. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 15th, 2019 memo from Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Wygowski, and to approve or not to approve the agreement between the City of Saline and Dixon Engineering and Inspection Services for the Industrial Drive water tower painting at an estimated amount of $28,393, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor to sign upon review and approval by the city attorney.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Superintendent Wygowski, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening. I would like to say that this is not for the actual painting
This is for the oversight of the painting. So $28,000 would not paint a water tower like that. So this proposal is by Dixon Engineering, who designed the industrial water tower and has done all the inspections. I believe the tower was built in either 2000 or 2002, and normally a 15-year span is what's normal for going before having to repaint. So what Dixon is proposing is that they would do the design specs, the bidding documents, be there during the construction to make everything's done according to specs and in compliance with Eagle, and then they'd have a post-construction phase to make sure it up to a year that it looks good and there are no flaws noted. So the painting of the project is estimated to be around $135,000 in addition to this fee.
And what did you say the industry standard is that a paint job of that nature and magnitude should last you about 15 years?
On this type of tank, 15 years is the norm.
And I apologize if I'm being obtuse. Why would Eagle have to be involved with the painting of a water tower?
Well, I think they want to make sure that it's, you don't need their permission, but it's normal to keep them in communication during the process to see if there's any other requirements that may be coming down from the state. So,
Again, it's
but
primarily
the exterior is not.
It's an aesthetic thing, not a
correct.
Yeah, not a substantive change to water treatment or quality. Okay.
Correct, but something may be found during the process that would require Eagle to be notified.
I see. Okay. Thank you for that. Questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent? Councilwoman Dillon.
I'll be honest, I was completely dumbfounded by these documents. There were a lot of them, and there were a lot of moving pieces that I didn't feel like they connected to each other. And so I kept looking for some sort of a summary, which I didn't really seem to find. So is it an industry standard to hire a third party in this?
So for me to draw up a document to ask somebody to paint that, I really don't know how to specify what needs to be done, what type of coating, and I have no way of knowing what thickness needs to be applied, and it's a very technical, expensive process. It's very important to a valuable asset to the community. So this is all that Dixon does, is water towers and bridges. So the gentleman that proposed this, that's done all of our work, his name is Tom Rounds. He's one of the most respected men in the state doing this type of work, and this would really be out of my scope of knowledge to have this done. So yes, it is normal to have a third party do this. They would know whether the companies that are bidding are even qualified to do the work and have some history of them with the other towers in the state.
Okay. I guess I would just assume that in order to paint a water tower, you would have to be state certified. That anything that's dealing with water and Eagle being involved, I mean, that there would have been some sort of certification process. And I guess I just wanted to better understand what exactly are these engineers doing? Are they inspecting every aspect of this tower, every nook, cranny, seam, valve, everything in it? Or are they just looking at the painting of the structure?
Well, they're doing, they're making up the specs for what needs to be done using their professional experience, and then they're putting the bid documents together, which is a fair amount of work also. They'll help us choose the proper firm to do the work, and then during the construction phase, or the painting phase, which is probably going to be about 3 weeks, they'll be on site during all the work to see what areas of the tank on the outside and also the dry part of the inside. When you go inside, there's a dry area where you can stand in and go up the stairs to the bowl. They'll see what needs to be welded, what needs to be sanded, sandblasted, what have you, to prepare it properly and make sure that work is done, and then make sure the coating is applied properly.
Okay, so they're on site for the whole process, so
Yes.
okay. Yep. And I apologize, are they an up to Or is this just an estimate at 28,000?
I
I think we're saying it's estimated amount. I mean, are we ballparking it or like?
I think they'll be very close. I can't say for certain since they put it that way, but Tom Rounds was just out of the tank a couple weeks ago. He came by for when we drained the water tower.
Right.
And he's done all the work on that. So I have a feeling he's going to be pretty close unless they really run into something that's unexpected. It has gone over the 15 years, which is normal, so there may be more pitting than is expected. It may be better than expected, but I'd say he's probably pretty close. He's been doing this a long time.
Okay. And can you remind me, is the engineering and the painting in the budget?
Yes, we have $175,000 in the budget.
Thank you. And which tower is this again?
This is the Industrial Drive Water Tower.
Okay.
And this is also including the tower being painted with the same design that's on that. If council wanted to change that design, there's a fair cost associated with adding something. To paint over the existing thing is not as difficult as putting something new on there, but it's something to think about.
Okay. Can just sell that space and advertise on it?
Maybe.
Thank you very much.
Additional questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent? No, then we have a motion on the floor to acknowledge receipt of the October 15th, 2019 memo. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Now, what's your pleasure? A motion to approve or not to approve, to authorize or not authorize?
Approve and to authorize.
Moved by Gearbox to approve and to authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Gearbox.
As we've seen in the past, it's proven not only cost-effective, but extremely mindful that we hired the experts to do the proper job and assess it. We know that we've had problems with the roof on the DPW facilities, we've had problems with other buildings, and we need to have the individuals that oversee it, but in this case, we're actually preparing ourselves to know what's going on. And then to have somebody actually there and supervise it. We've gotten better at holding them accountable than I think we have maybe in the past because of the way that things have changed over in terms of staff and so forth. We don't have the time to plate this on necessarily all of our staff's shoulders. There's just not the expertise to do this, and we don't expect that. And I think if we're going to do this and we want it done right to protect our water sources and all our infrastructure, a small investment to make sure we do it according to a plan that's thought out and appropriate and covering our needs is the proper way to do this. So I appreciate you doing this and looking into what we really need to do to get this one painted. And then probably we're going to have to do the same for the other tower on Ann Arbor Street
Next year.
next year. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Seal.
I just want to echo what Mr. Gearbox says. It's certainly not without precedent. We've hired Tetra Tech to work with you folks down at the water treatment plant, or the wastewater disposal plant. We hire engineering firms to help Mr. Fordyce and other people with other projects. I myself, having been in a position, have written RFPs before, understand exactly what you're saying when you say you're kind of overwhelmed by the scope of what needs to be done to do it properly. So I am certainly in support of this.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Additional comments? Discussion on the motion. We have a motion before us moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Bogowski, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, thank you. I have two. First, from the Arts and Culture Committee, good news and bad news. You may recall the Arts and Culture Council authorized or approved Arts and Culture to apply for 2 grants from MCACA. One grant proposal was not filled or granted. The other was. Unfortunately, so the grant proposal that was not given was the project grant, which was the grant to continue work on the actual collection. And the grant that was given is the web consultation grant, and that is to develop web-based, better web-based, more and better web-based access and information about the collection. So Arts and Culture has not met since we received this news. So there's it's happy, sad. And then for the Environmental Commission, the Environmental Recognition Award nomination period is open, and nominations will be accepted until November 15th. Forms are available in paper at the front desk, and at some point soon, they should appear on the city website. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Councilwoman Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. My first report is that the River Raisin Watershed meeting is coming up. It's this Thursday. So I'm excited to go. Our own Jim Peters is going to present on the Salt Springs. So it's nice to support our valued president of our historic society. I've also made an effort to recruit someone to represent from Lodi Township. They're so close to us, and so much of our work, so many of the residents do come to Saline. And in my years of being the liaison for the watershed, we've never had a Lodi Township representative. So I was successful in making contact with someone who expressed interest, and we will see if she is able to attend. And I will just they're having a difficulty with people showing up, and so I'll be just making an effort to make sure that members are retained or new members can join as much as possible. May I also do the Historic District Commission?
Please.
Okay. So the Historic District Commission has been holding walking meetings where we walk through a district before the actual meeting, and it's a chance for residents to go along and observe what kind of things we're looking at, maybe pick up some extra knowledge about houses, and that is open to the public. The October meeting was canceled due to rain, and it was the first time it was cold, so we all decided to stay warm and cozy. I am not sure about the November status yet. We approved an application for a decorative fence on Henry Street, and we will be giving City Council an update next month on our efforts, our continuing efforts to maintain our certified local government status. So that work has been ongoing. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Additional committee, commission, or task force reports. Mr. CO.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Two announcements, really. First of all, I just want to remind everybody that the Medical Marijuana Task Force has a questionnaire on the street right now. You can either complete the questionnaire online or stop by the desk here and pick up a hard copy of it and fill it out. The deadline for turning those in is this Friday at the end of the day. So please, if you have it in mind that you wanted to do one of those and you haven't done it yet, please get to it and get it done. The second thing is, this past week, the mayor and I attended the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, the SEMCOG General Assembly. During the afternoon breakout session, I went to a session on asset management and capital improvement projects. And I guess I'm proud to say that I think Saline was only one of the 33% of the communities present who actively engaged in asset management and capital improvement projects. I was very proud to be there and understand that I was in that elite group of people. The one thing that they did announce was a capital improvement plan coordination map with other utilities. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that yet, Mr. Fordyce, but they were going to have Mishcon and some of the other public utilities enter their future projects that they're aware of on a capital improvement map so that we could coordinate and so that we weren't repaving a street this year and having Mishcon dig it up next year without. So perhaps now that Tetra Tech has the SAW grant information fresh in our hands, might be a good time for us to enter in there our own GPS information and so on so we can coordinate those things in the future as well. Not to add to your work burden, sir, but it just seemed like an excellent idea, years in the making and too long in coming. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilwoman McClellan.
Yeah, it's the Parks Commission met last Tuesday. I was not able to attend. My daughter had a choir concert. She had a solo in. But Carla, do you want to talk at all about what the discussion was of the dog park and what we did at the meeting?
Please,
Thank you.
if you're so inclined.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, the Park Commission met last Tuesday, and we invited public to come give some input. We were considering putting together a second dog park. We have the current dog park at Mill Pond. And we had actually more people respond via email that couldn't make the meeting, but did give some valuable input. And we had about 8 to 10 people that were here for the meeting to kind of talk and discuss and things like that. Some ideas, we have all that information, we're putting it all together. But I believe essentially everyone loves the dog park. There's a lot of people that love the water. There's a lot of people that don't like the water. And I believe having a second dog park that is completely enclosed without that water feature is very desirable. The Park Commission is very interested in making sure that we have it in a good location that is conducive for people, for parking, for shade, for possible trails, and things like that. So those are all the considerations that we're taking into consideration. Next month, we'll kind of do the wrap-up at the Park Commission meeting, and then eventually we'll be coming to City Council for approval or not approval or whatnot. So, but there's a lot of interest. We've been gathering that, and we keep getting a few responses via email. So, yeah, it was a very good input session.
Thank you, Director Scruggs. Any additional commission, committee, or task force reports? How about reports or other announcements? I've got two. State Representative Donald Lazinski and I are co-hosting a coffee hour together on November the 7th at the Saline District Library from 6 p.m. to 7. If you're interested in municipal issues or anything that's going on in state government, we strongly encourage you to attend, and a subsequent media release will be issued, if not later this week, then certainly next week. And then I can confirm that our second annual Community Job Fair and Community Showcase, we're adding a component to the event, will be on November the 19th, likely between 2 and 6 p.m. Shorter this year, and we want to catch people after the normal work hours. The hub will likely be at the Methodist Church, although that has yet to be confirmed. And tomorrow, as a matter of fact, I'm shooting a PSA at McNaughton and Gunn with the owner and president, Julie McFarland, to promote the event. So there will be a subsequent press release, flyers, yard signs, but anything you can do to help spread the word would be greatly appreciated. Anybody who's looking for a job in the Saline community or anybody who's looking to better themselves economically is strongly encouraged to attend. And if you own and operate a business in the Saline community and you'd like to participate, please call my office or the city treasurer, business ambassador, Mickey Jo Bennett. Are there other reports or announcements? First, Councilwoman McClellan, and then Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, just letting everyone know that the Saline Main Street Trunk or Treat is Wednesday from 6:30 to 8:30. So it is generally pretty well attended, so expect to have a good time and expect to maybe wait in the line a little bit long, but it's kind of fun. You get to see all the kids and you get to see all the trunks, and there's lots of community partners and businesses that have trunks signed up to participate. And so if you have a minute or 2 hours, come on down on Wednesday.
Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just to tag on to that, the Main Street is still looking for volunteers to help assist, and if you just go to their Saline Main Street website, you'll be able to sign up for potential positions. They need people to help with crowd control and just directing people and so forth, just to make it a safe event, and they would appreciate your help.
Very good. It's a great event. I'll be there. Okay, if there are no other reports or announcements, oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Dillon.
Tagging on, Wednesday night, October 23rd, will be the Chamber of Commerce Business Enterprise Awards. And that will be held at Stonebridge Golf Course beginning at 5:30 p.m. Tickets are still available.
Thank you. And actually, I will be unable to attend that event, but Councilwoman Dillon will be representing my office and City Council and presenting the tributes on my behalf. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate your willingness to step up and support. If there are no additional reports or announcements, Director Scruggs, would you like to talk about Saline Youth Council?
I would. This is the first time since the Youth Council was established that we're failing to get a quorum. I attribute this to the busy academic schedules, the athletic schedules, the music schedules, all the other extracurriculars that all of our high school and middle school kids are in. And right now, we have only 8 students that have filled out applications to be in. Typically, we filled all 13 seats, plus we have liaisons, which are people that aren't officially on the committee, but want to be involved and so on and so forth. And we haven't been able to meet quorum. I'm suggesting and looking for approval from City Council to kind of table the Youth Council until January, when maybe we can do some recruiting. All the kids that are involved right now have been actively talking with their peers at school, trying to get them to fill out applications and to come on board with the Youth Council. First time we've been in this situation, unfortunately, or fortunately, but I think that with some kind of boosting this up and trying to get, the kids talking about it, we can get an active group in January.
So Director Scruggs, you and I previously discussed this matter, so just to be crystal clear, your recommendation would be to develop consensus from City Council to essentially put a hiatus on the Youth Council for the time being, reestablish it, work aggressively in the fall to recruit some new members, reestablish the group in January of 2020.
Correct, after school begins.
Okay. Questions for Director Scruggs? Councilman Mitchell?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I messaged you in the past that this was a group that I was interested in working with. It's interesting timing. And I guess what I would like to do is to ask if I could be part of someone who keeps in touch with these kids and someone who helps with the effort to maintain and grow the program. And I understand the need to take a hiatus. And I just want to make sure I understand the timeline because I heard something different in what both of you were saying. So you're saying, is this correct color? We're going to have a hiatus during the rest of this trimester through the end of December. And then this coming January, we'll make recruiting efforts during that time and then hope to start up in January. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess I'm just asking if I can join the parade.
I have no objections to Director Scruggs and the current council liaison, Heidi McClellan, keeping you in the loop. And yeah, any efforts you could contribute to helping to recruit some young people to serve on this important board would be greatly appreciated.
I thank you, Your Honor.
Heidi.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it's an interesting year. I feel like we probably had 50 kids 2 years ago, probably about 30, an average of 35, 40 that would show up for meetings last year. And then I don't know if it was the leadership. Part of it's peer driven. I mean, it's very peer driven, and we had a really intense group of government, political science kids active in the last 2 years. And if you have kids and if you know kids, you kind of know that those things go in cycles, even with sports and other things. And so this year and part of it is they are so busy, but I think it's just a different peer group, and kind of, when you have 1 or 2 kids that are involved, they kind of pull in other kids, and then sometimes it's, one kid has friends that are, all over doing other stuff. So I think it's important that we continue to recruit within the 3 months. It's really only 2 months at this point because we would have had a meeting last week.
Right.
So it's November, December is what we're asking, what she's asking to do hiatus for. And typically those are not the most well-attended meetings anyway. But I think just putting a push out there with a couple key recruiters. We won't have any issues starting back up in January, and I regret that I will not be the council liaison to the group come January because my term will be up, but I do have a daughter that's on the youth council currently, and she's happy to keep me in the loop, and I'm sure I'll be a part of the group from going forward. So
Marvelous, thank you. So any objection then to essentially putting the group on hiatus and reconvening in January, Councilwoman Dillon?
I don't have an objection. I just wanted to mention, I appreciate that Ms. McClellan mentioned the word government in there, because I think what has happened with a lot of clubs, and I'm not pointing this one out specifically, is that they're becoming service clubs. They're just a feeder for, we need free labor, we need this. When I go to MML events, they have breakout sessions for these youth council groups. There are sponsorship opportunities of bringing students to these events. The National League of Cities has a huge section of their website devoted to youth council and programming for them. And I mean, it's really meant to be a feeder system into government. And so I'm hoping that maybe there's an avenue that we can get back into some of the government classes at the schools and encourage those kids that are going that way, that, hey, this might be a great opportunity for you. It's not that we just need you to do X, Y, and Z, public service tasks. So I would like to see the youth council go more in that direction. Like I said, when I go to other events, it is really nice to see those students engaged at that level.
And we have been, in the past, we've gone to National League of Cities. Our M-Parks organization offers a youth council symposium. It's like a weekend retreat type thing. We've been very active in all those things in the past. The schedules of our students are really driving the participation. But I think there's opportunity to maybe seek out some other students. I mean, there's a lot of students at the high school that may not be as involved, that maybe we can kind of seek out that group.
And just one suggestion for going forward too, and not actively being a part of it. I think potentially there's option to maybe look at a different time for meeting as well. So just kind of being flexible with their schedules, because I know there's tons of kids that are, you will see them here at regular city council meetings that are involved in AP Gov and government classes at the high school. There's definitely interest there in learning and being a part of government. There's definitely enthusiasm. It's just that they are so strapped for, these generally are juniors and seniors. We do have we had some 8th graders in the past, freshmen, sophomores as well, but typically they're juniors and seniors that are part of government classes at Saline High School, and a lot of them from AP Gov classes. And they're not only in AP Gov classes, but other AP classes as well. It's just a lot that we're asking these kids to do. And they want to serve, and they want to be part of government and what the city's doing. So I'm looking forward to it.
So unless there's objection from the dais, we'll agree with Director Scruggs' decision, which is to essentially put the group on hiatus for the next 2 months and aggressively recruit and hope to reconvene in January. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving right along, Mr. Wagowski, wastewater treatment update.
All right, good evening again. Number 1 filter continues to operate. Number 2 Nova filter, we've had a new touch screen and PLC put in last week, so we have 2 Nova filters running as of Thursday. Cross our fingers. I haven't heard back from Mr. Wood I'm not sure if Mr. Campbell has or not, as far as an agreement with Nova. But hopefully that'll get taken care of. The RBC project, we have a pre-bid meeting on October 29th that Tetra Tech is having set up. UIS, Utilities Instrumentation Services, installed 5 new motor starters for the RBCs last week. So some progress is being made there. Any questions on the wastewater plant?
Ms. Mitchell? And then Ms. Dillon?
Oh, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just so the audience and members of the public know, I seem to be focused on this topic, and I sent a peppering of questions, and thank you so much for your answers, and I will share those. I just wanted to confirm how many RBCs are up and running at this point?
So we have 18 and
Right.
11 or 12, depending on the day. We get one started and then it's kicking out, so.
Okay.
So in the proposal, they have, I think, 7 specified for repair.
Okay. And then, can you remind me what the time frame, when you step back and look at the whole project from start to finish, when do you anticipate that all of those units will be up again?
I believe they're anticipating that in May of next year. They have to come in and pull the units, and then, it takes a couple months at the factory and you put an order, and it could be 8 to 12 weeks to get the unit. So there's going to be like a hurry up and then wait type process.
Sure. And then I think, let me just check my notes. I had sent Mr. Goroski some questions regarding odor complaints. And one of my questions was, looking at the late summer increase, has an explanation been found? And Mr. Wygoski wrote back that the thought was it was screening material from dumpsters that was causing that odor.
That was one of the that was a known source.
Okay.
So I'm not sure exactly what period you're talking about, but I know it was very hot for a little bit there, which would make things
Right.
more rancid. But lately, we have not been receiving complaints.
Okay.
And I did get the Acrolog, the hydrogen sulfide monitor, and that is hanging out on the site right now, collecting data. So at next meeting, I hope to have that data downloaded and share that with you.
And I think, just for the public's clarification, Eagle had been out testing, and they had a parts per million meter. And this meter you have is much more sensitive. It's a parts per billion, is that right?
Correct. So it's an order of 1,000
Right.
more sensitive.
So I think one of the questions we had asked from this podium earlier had been, Eagle, there's a report where Eagle said, we're anecdotally reporting odor, but our meter hasn't shown anything. So I think what I finally understand now is that your meter is more sensitive in the hope of even capturing things that their meter was not capable of.
Yes, our meter will be more sensitive, but there are also some odors that are not hydrogen sulfide. So this is only sniffing hydrogen sulfide, which is the predominant odor in sewage. So if there was some other odor, this is just a one chemical system, right? But by and large, that is the majority of odors from wastewater treatment plant and sewage.
So that's the commercially accepted
Yes.
standard?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So it's possible that some other type of odor was present when the Eagle folks were saying, gosh, it's not registering, but we can definitely smell something. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Odor is very subjective if you don't have an instrument. So you and I could be in the same place and you might smell it. And a lot of times what people do on site is they say, I think I smell something, and then now I don't, and it's really, and that's really straining to smell it. So, and then other people are hypersensitive. For example, my daughter can smell a banana from a room away, right? So you do have different sensitivities.
Right. Well, and one of the things in working with residents on that side, it does seem that there'll be kind of a strong waft, and it's very strong, but then it's not always consistently there. So I view that, okay, we're having this strong waft, but whereas before it was a consistent over many hours, it's coming and going. So at least it's going a little bit. And we, I appreciate your efforts to pursue. And then I guess my only other question regarding the screenings, What's happening with that? What is the process now? What is being done differently after it was raised?
Well, the approval for that waste stream was delayed. We had to have a special
That's
approval
right.
from the landfill for that waste stream. So we
Okay.
had to have that analyzed, approved, and then get that notice into Republic, who does the hauling.
So what is the difference now before you versus then when you got the approval? Like what is happening differently?
So on a weekly basis, Republic comes and takes a dumpster and hauls it off where they weren't taking it for a period because they didn't have the approval.
I see what you're
So
saying.
it was stuck on site
Okay.
and smelling more, and it was warm at that time.
I see. I didn't catch that end of the stick when you were reporting out. So I didn't understand that the material was on site
Yes.
longer and it was summer.
Mhm.
So the fact that once a week, do you estimate that once a week is going to be enough next summer?
I believe so. It traditionally has been.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think it's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Those are all the questions I have.
Any additional questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent? Councilwoman Dillon.
Thank you. So the RBCs, we're talking 7 months, correct, to fix those from now, about?
Yeah, 6, 7 months, yes.
So what happens if more go down in the interim? Like, when do we hit the critical, we can't function stage?
Good question. We're trying to get them running. We just got the 5 electrical units in, and we'll try to get, we have one that's running and not running, and we're working on another one. So, you know, I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Okay. So there's no way to do them, like, so in 7 months, those that are non-functional will be functioning? Or are they coming on in stages?
Well, I think the problem is we have to put it out to bid. So that, you know, they had to design the, you know, the proposal, put it out to bid. So that's 6 weeks right there. And then from that process, it may be quicker, but they're being conservative, I think, saying 2 to 3 months from the factory for those parts to come back in.
Okay. And then can you remind me, have we signed off on the odor study, even though the RBCs are not functional?
I believe they're totally separate issues.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I did have a couple things on the water plant
Please.
also, real quick. So the industrial drive water tower was down for about 2 weeks due to a faulty mud valve. We were trying to flush that tank along with the hydrant flushing due to some complaints with sediment. The valve was faulty, so it was replaced. They replaced it with a curing agent. They sealed it with a curing agent. It took 5 days to cure. We filled the tank back up, 2 days of bacteriological testing, and we put it back online on Saturday. The plan is to flush that water tower quarterly to see what the frequency will be. If it's clean on a quarterly basis, maybe we'll go to 6 months, but we won't know until we start flushing that. And also, I know Linda wanted me to mention, we did do lead and copper testing in September of 20 of our homes. This year normally it's done on random homes throughout the city. This year we concentrated on our oldest mains and in the historic district. So we got 20 homes. All 20 of the homes came back non-detect for lead. So.
Excellent. The issues with the industrial park water tower, I'm assuming between you and Mr. Fortes, all of this, including the most recent update, which you provided moments ago, that's all been provided to our friends at American Soy, correct?
I have not talked to them recently, but.
Yes? Okay. Very good. Mr. Campo, quickly.
If I could, thank you. Just an update, reference, the NOVA filters is, as Steve just mentioned, I did receive late this afternoon a draft language for an agreement between the city and NOVA. And so we'll go through that, review that, and then here in the very near future, hope to bring that before council for consideration.
Mr. Wagowski, thank you. Appreciate it.
I beg your pardon, Your Honor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
May I ask some questions about the water tower?
Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your forbearance, Mr. Wagowski. So one of the questions I asked you was that we have ongoing reports of residents having sporadic, but having sediment issues or dark or cloudy water. and I said, is their water problem possibly also affected in a similar way? So we had been talking about the industrial park water tower, and the residents would draw from the Henry Street Tower. And I think in your message you said that the valve in the Henry Street Tower is also faulty? Is that right?
Correct, it's the same type of valve.
And would that cause those cloudy occasional, is that one of a possible cause?
You know, a lot of times that's caused by surges in pressure, just so the water in the mains is usually the cause of that. So if you have a main break or you're doing flushing, you'll see that sediment build up. It's possible, and I know you asked about replacing that valve. We don't have the bill yet from the emergency repair at Industrial Drive, so we'll have to look at what that would entail and whether that's in the budget. But I'm not sure with the homes in question whether they would be served by that Henry Street water tower or the industrial.
Well, especially because you're describing surges in water pressure being the root cause, one of the probable root causes of residents noticing cloudy or brown water. Is there anything that we need to be doing proactively as far as trying to maintain more even pressure? I mean, obviously a water break isn't.
Well, that's the point of the water tower, is to maintain pressure, right? So you fill it up mainly at night, so that's sitting there during high demand. You have, in addition to your pumps, you have that water tower pressure sitting on the system.
Okay.
So that does even out the pressure.
So the mud valve for the industrial park, what effect was that causing?
We don't know that it has had any effect, but what the mud valve does, it flushes any sediment that's in the bottom of the tank. It's like a drain to drain out the sediment from the bottom of the water tower.
Okay.
So normally that's done when the hydrants are flushed.
So normally, how often does that happen again?
Once a year.
Once a year. And so how long has it been since the Henry Street Tower was flushed?
You know, I don't know. I've only been here a little over a year, so.
So it's not happened in this year. Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Campbell, by any chance?
My understanding is we used to do that, as Steve just alluded, when we would do flushing, hydrant flushing. And since, and I believe actually a former longtime employee that did that used to work with our water, wastewater guys to do that, and that has not happened in the last couple of years, I believe, is my understanding.
I think that's true. When that person retired, I think that communication got lost. That was the prompt, is my understanding.
I see. Okay. So it's a kind of a process gap that happened during overturn of staff. Is that right?
And that type of valve could fail anytime if you know.
I see.
So it's not necessarily failed because it hadn't been used, but it's a good idea to exercise your valves once a year anyway.
Right. So, Your Honor, he's not here?
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. I couldn't see. I'm so sorry. I leaned over and I couldn't see. American Soy, what's the need? Were they saying that there was a water problem?
They were complaining about water quality.
Do you know what types of water quality issues they were having?
Hard water, sediment in the water.
Okay. So I'm no expert, but it sounds like the Henry Street valve, like if we're saying it could be sediment, then the residents could be noticing sediment from this faulty mud valve at Henry Street.
Well, the American Soy is right next to the Industrial Drive water tower. So that's the likely source. If that was the problem, since we had flushed the mains and we were still having the problem, we tried to flush the water tower. So Henry Street would not affect that side of town at all.
So you're saying that being right next to the water tower is one of the, so if we were to look at that for Henry Street, would be homes right next to the water tower would report cloudy water? That would be the same indicator?
Correct, that would be the most likely first indicator.
And I haven't kept any type of a map. When you've received talks, or maybe this is a Mr. Fordyce question, when you've received reports, are those close to the water tower, or are they? further
I
out?
haven't received many from Henry Street area, but normally, it seems like we do get some from Old Creek, and normally we refer those calls to
Old Creek.
Priscilla at DPW.
So would that, I mean, Old Creek doesn't, is that far? Would that be considered close to the water tower? How do you say? I know.
Fairly.
Fairly? Okay. And then, so the mud valve for Henry Street, I see you wrote that it's, let's see, Henry Street, fall of 2020, a year from now. That's when the Henry Street valve is going to be?
So the plan is to paint the Henry Street water tower and repair the valve at the same time?
I see. Because you drain it for both?
Correct.
So you don't want to, like, spend tons of time? Okay. I wanted to be able to talk to residents, and I really appreciate, I think I have a clear picture now, so I appreciate the team effort and helping me understand.
If there's nothing further, Mr. Wagowski, thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you want to provide a brief update on the organizational review?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Organizational implementation.
Sure. As you all, I'm sure, have seen in the packet, when we sent the packet out, there was not an update, but I do have an update that for the Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director position, conditional offer was accepted and background check is moving forward, so I'm hopeful for that position to move forward and excited about that. So that is the current update that I have for the organizational review.
Since it came up last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, and it's somewhat germane, did you want to provide a brief update on assessing as well?
Sure. So we're continuing to work, as I mentioned at the last meeting, working with Mr. Brazeau as our city assessor as we move forward. Still attempting to bring on a full-time as you all know, he's working with the consortium out of the downriver communities in Wayne County, but he's continuing thus far to help us out and serve as our assessor until we can find a more long-term resolution. Anything more?
No, I think that's good. Questions for Mr. Campbell, Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. Have you explored utilizing services from the county for assessing?
The quick answer is we did a year, was it 18, right? 18, when our former long-term assessor retired. We did talk about that, and they're not, under the current leadership, they're not interested in, and they do provide for a handful of townships and such, but they're not interested in adding to that.
That was 18 months ago, or has that been a?
That's been their long-term position.
Okay.
Okay, if there's nothing further, we'll proceed then to the strategic plan proposal, as I indicated at the last meeting. If you take 3 and pass them down. If you take 3 and pass them down. The city manager, myself, and city clerk did meet with Marilyn. Remind me of Marilyn's last name. Can you pronounce it?
I think it's Summerick.
Summerick, okay, from the Lead Institute, I believe is what her LLC, her business is called. In front of you, dated October the 11th, 2019, is her proposal. We did discuss an approach similar to what we've used in the past, which is that she would conduct an initial strategic planning session with city council and department heads. We would then transition to a public open house organized very similar to what we did in 2018, and then we would reconvene likely after the first of the year to finalize our strategic framework for the upcoming fiscal year. The dates are enumerated on the back page along with her cost, which, and this was confirmed by the city treasurer, is less than what we've paid in the past to Mr. Bender. So what I would request, I don't mean to put you all on the spot, but I did mention, of course I did mention this 2 weeks ago. I would ask that you take a look at this. If you have any objections, please let me know by the close of business Wednesday, because if there's consensus and agreement to move forward and to utilize Maryland services, I want to confirm these dates and get out the corresponding media release announcing to the public that we will be having a public open house, and we strongly encourage their participation. I will say that Marilyn came in, I think about a week ago now, and met with the city manager, the clerk, and I for about an hour and a half. We had a delightful conversation. I left that meeting more convinced that she is the right person to lead us in this endeavor later this year. Any questions for me? Okay. Then we'll proceed to the second to last, oh yeah, if you wouldn't mind passing those out too. This, I apologize, this was not enumerated as a discussion item, but I wanted to provide you this document in advance of our next meeting. There is a formal request that we have received from Saline Area Schools and Pittsfield Charter Township to allow Saline Utilities to service a small site on the Saline High School athletic fields. We're not discussing the issue tonight, nor would it be appropriate to develop consensus. I just wanted to give you a heads up that this will be returning as an action item, likely at our next meeting on November the 4th. Transitioning to the automatic annexation proposal, as many of you will recall, I made a formal presentation to the Saline Township Board at their most recent meeting a week ago Tuesday. Councilwoman Dillon was gracious enough to join me. I read a prepared statement that emphasized the value and benefit of an automatic annexation agreement. It would have been inappropriate to seek consensus on the spot, but I did answer and address a number of questions and concerns that the board had, their attorney had, and some members of the public had. Developing an agreement of this scope and magnitude would take considerable time, not only to designate the appropriate properties, but to talk about utilities, services, preservation of green space, et cetera. I plan to reconnect with Supervisor Marion sometime this week, and I think it's pretty likely that I would return to their board at their next meeting to address any additional questions and concerns they have. If they are in favor of moving forward, I think a working group would likely need to be convened, consisting of individuals from both Saline Township and the City of Saline. But I will keep you posted on that. And Councilwoman Dillon, if your schedule permits, once I confirm with Supervisor Marion, I'd be delighted if you join me again at that meeting. Okay. Last item, and I'll end tonight by addressing some of the questions and concerns that were raised relating to the Huntington Woods connecting sidewalk. Mr. Fordyce, do you want to begin by providing an update on our comprehensive sidewalk initiative, specifically the proposed work that is hopefully to transpire in the not-too-distant future in the northwest quadrant of the city?
Yes, thank you. So the current phase of the sidewalk replacement program, as I'm sure everybody is well aware, notices went out a little late and didn't provide property owners very much time to review their options and join the program. Despite that short window of time, of the slightly more than 100 letters that went out, 45 have been returned requesting to join in with the city program. That does leave us a little bit low on the quantity that we bid out, which, you know, when you bid a contract out, you're saying to the contractor, here's how much work we want to do, and they base their prices on that amount of work. So with it being somewhat less, about 38% less than what we anticipated, we had to have discussions with the contractor. And what they have agreed to do is complete the roughly 62% of the promised amount of work that is currently booked, either city responsibility or those 45 private property owners that have sent in signed agreements. They will complete that work this fall as originally scheduled, and then return in the spring, and we'll spend the winter giving folks another opportunity to join into the program, and we should easily be able to find that next $38,000 worth of work and have that completed in the spring at the same prices.
Very good. Well, let me just add one thing, and I communicated to several constituents in writing on this subject. And so my colleagues at the dais are aware of my position. In retrospect, and I'm only speaking for myself here, but in retrospect, I think my zeal to complete another round of sidewalk repairs superseded my logic and reason, for lack of a better way to articulate it. And I think what we need to do moving forward is to emulate the approach we used in the previous quadrant, which was we gave property owners and homeowners approximately a month to consider their options and to opt in. You know, in the 2 weeks between our last meeting and our current meeting, I received dozens of phone calls, text messages. I had several people come into my office and meet with me on this subject. And when I explained the program, every individual who I spoke to or met with saw value in this approach. And they applauded the city council for spearheading an initiative that hadn't been done since 1990, nearly 30 years ago. So the objections weren't the substance of the program. The objections were the time frame in which they had to consider their options and opt in. So again, this is a valuable program. It will improve walkability in the northwest quadrant of the city. But moving forward, my standard, my approach is to give residents at least a month to appropriately consider their options. And evidently, when we do that, we get the kind of response we got a year ago, which is a huge majority opted to participate into the program, leverage the economies of scale, and allow us to improve the walkability in their geographic region of the city. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, and I agree with that, and we've already begun efforts to be able to do that in the next round. We've actually have most of the quantities in the areas already inspected and quantified for the next round of replacements in the next fiscal year.
Good. Okay. Questions for Mr. Fordyce, Mr. Gearbaugh?
I do know that some situations need to be re-engineered because of the way that the city put the sidewalks in, considering the Bennett Street ones. Will
yes.
those be part of that, or will that be another
Those will be
delay?
the very last round.
Okay.
There are some situations where it's not just a simple replacement. There needs to be a significant redesign of the sidewalk. We have some areas where there are stairs, and you can't just simply replace stairs with slabs and have acceptable slopes. So there are a couple special cases like that will have to essentially be their own project. We'll have to do some survey work and get those designed to ADA standards.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. Mr. Fordyce, just for clarification, did you just get a low percentage of people opting in, or did you get a low percentage of people replying? Like, is
not
there
really sure
a
the
group
difference.
of people that have not replied yet to whether they wanted to opt in? Or did they say no? Have you gotten out of your 100?
I didn't ask people to say no. I said, if you want to participate, here's a deadline.
Okay.
So those,
And evidently, that's the approach that we used in the previous round as well.
yes.
Yeah.
So is there any follow-up to residents, like if they hadn't gotten a letter? I know theoretically this time they were hand-delivered.
Right.
But, I mean, was everybody home? I mean,
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess I just want to make sure that we're not missing people.
With the way things are laid out now, with us doing a certain amount of work this fall and then continuing the work in the spring, everybody who got a letter and did not send in an agreement, did not respond, they will get another letter and with another deadline and more time to consider their options. So all those folks who did not respond will get a second communication.
Okay. And theoretically, what is the window still to put in concrete?
You can put in concrete if you protect it below freezing. So we still have plenty of time for concrete work.
I guess what I'm kind of going very much around the barn here to get to my answer is there an opportunity to go to some of those areas that got cut off of this section, like my street?
Yeah.
And say, hey, do you want to get in on this now and not have to wait another year?
Not in this round, no.
Okay.
The contractor needs to get in, do the work, and get out in order to maintain their profitability margins. So, and I'm a little leery of doing some more last-minute additions to the program at this point. So, the work that's city responsibility and the ones we have agreements for already, that's what will be completed this fall. Over the winter, as we put together the work for the spring, if those folks who got letters in this round still don't participate, then we will expand the geographic area and find additional private work.
Okay. And so, I'm sorry, just one last question. So then, if theoretically I didn't reply to you and I don't repair my sidewalk, then what happens and what's the time frame for that? Because then by then your trucks are long gone and you're done paving.
Yeah. Eventually, we'll go into an enforcement phase. That hasn't been scheduled yet, but when we work through all the opportunities to repair sidewalks, then we will have to go back and begin the enforcement process. We'll give people a notice that says, you have sidewalk that doesn't meet standards, it has to be repaired, and then we can start looking at the civil infraction process.
Okay.
But that's a ways out.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbow, last question?
Just one concern. I think a lot of individuals weren't aware of what sidewalks were being replaced. The markings had either faded or...
There were a handful of addresses where we had some mistakes. So there were a small handful of letters that went out for properties that did not have any markings. So the markings have been freshened up, and the folks that got letters, I think I've spoken to all of them, the ones who got letters that shouldn't have gotten letters. So.
Okay. But we'll have that as a regular part of the future going forward, that we will remark those or freshen the marks to make sure that we identify those? Okay, thank you.
And I think, Mr. Gearbow, that's an excellent point, and it underscores the need to give residents and property owners ample time to weigh their options, because the letter that went out indicated that if you'd like a re-inspector, you'd like to talk to us about your classification, you can contact the DPW director and schedule an appointment. So.
Yeah, and we did do a number of those
You did.
re-inspections on
You
this
did.
round.
Yep. And people appreciated that. It's just, again, giving them ample time to consider all their options and make an informed decision. Mr. Fordyce, thank you. Appreciate it. So briefly on the Huntington Woods connecting sidewalk, and I know we lost a number of residents, but I appreciate those who stayed, and I think I speak for everyone on council when I say we appreciate all those, including our young people who came and spoke about this issue. It was addressed as a discussion item at the last meeting, and I'm happy to provide an additional update. So as many people indicated, this was a project that was first discussed in 2002. And here we are in 2019, and I can freely acknowledge that 17 years is far too long. So how things progressed this construction season is Mr. Shipman did engage a contractor who did submit a plan, a design to the Washtenaw County Road Commission, which was approved in late July of 2019. Fast forward about a month and a half, residents and interested parties started to see cones and construction barrels placed along the route. There was a obligatory stakeholders meeting that consisted of the contractor, representatives from Washtenaw County Road Commission, Washtenaw Engineering, and I believe our DPW director also participated in that meeting, at which time it was decided that the design that was reviewed and approved by the Washtenaw County Road Commission would not be sufficient. It would need to be redesigned and resubmitted to the Washtenaw County Road Commission for review and approval. That was subsequently done. I intervened on behalf of Mr. Shipman last week to the director of the Washtenaw County Road Commission to inquire what the status of the redesign was. Within 48 hours, the redesign was reviewed and approved. However, at this point, I think there is some concern on the part of Mr. Shipman. I'm not sure he and his contractor agree with all of the specifics of the redesign, and I hope to know more in the next couple days. I'll also note that this is a project, although rather short in length, this is an initiative that is fraught with a number of hardships and perils, in large part because of the topography and because it's multi-jurisdictional. I'm not trying to assign blame or chastise anybody for the lack of progress. I'm simply noting the reality. And acknowledging that, I want to add what I articulated 2 weeks ago, which is I am actively considering whether a change in oversight and management of this project is necessary and appropriate to move it forward and finalize that. That's not a conclusion that I will reach lightly, and it's not a conclusion I have reached to date, but there may be a forthcoming recommendation to my council or to my city council colleagues. I'll also address two other concerns that were raised during the public comment period. There is a document, I believe this was addressed by Mr. Lafort before he left. There is a document that was issued by Mr. Shipman to the then HOA president of Huntington Woods regarding the maintenance and liability of the sidewalk. That document was never signed and executed by the HOA, and at this point I've approached Pulte Homes. I had a very upbeat, positive conversation with Joe Score from Pulte Homes, inquiring whether they would assume maintenance and liability. I didn't get a guarantee, but I expect to follow up with him in the coming weeks. But again, my initial conversation was quite positive. I've also heard from a number of residents regarding the speed limit on Macon Road, and that is something that that I think should be addressed, and I think the HOA should submit something in writing to my office, and I'd be happy to forward it on to the Washtenaw County Road Commission that reviews and establishes, helps to establish speed limits on county roads such as Macon. Again, I hope to know more in the next couple days from Mr. Shipman, and I will communicate those out to the Phase 1 president. I do want to note, I do not have contact information. I have a few email addresses, but if there are residents who live in Phase 2 who would like to be updated on this issue, I would strongly encourage them to contact or email my office so that I can provide future communications. I think that's pretty much it. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just as you mentioned, keeping Washtenaw Road Commission, County Washtenaw Road Commission I guess, in the loop. Also Saline Township, because there's 4 different jurisdictions overseeing this whole thing, I think that's where this confusion continues to occur, and just making sure that everyone is on table. And I think that's assumptions, and not that we would think that Washtenaw County Road Commission would not communicate with the Saline Township. It didn't. And so I think at times we have so many people on par that I think it's really starting to bring all those people to the table at the same time, because we just don't control that property.
I agree, and that's an excellent point. And I want to say this, and again, I'm not trying to belittle or assign blame. I have many friends that work for the Washtenaw County Road Commission, and overall, they do a fine job. And the executive director, who I know, and the board chair, they do an outstanding job. They're tremendous public servants. But I do think it was a failure, and, well, let me rephrase. I think it would have been a best practice to provide some sort of obligatory communication to the affected property owners in Saline Township that this project was forthcoming. That did not happen, and I'm disappointed it didn't happen. And had I known that the Road Commission wasn't going to provide that type of communique, I would have expected, or I would have, as an individual, stepped forward and made sure to contact those individuals in a proactive way. This was an issue, as Councilwoman Dillon can attest, this was an issue that was discussed last week at the Saline Township Board meeting, and I did indicate to Supervisor Marion and his board that I would keep them abreast of the progress. And I'll also note, because there is a Saline Township resident on Macon Road in which much of this sidewalk will be constructed, I have spoken to her on a number of occasions and followed up with her, as a matter of fact, by phone today, and had a very good conversation. And told her I would keep her up to date as things progress. That was pretty long-winded, my apologies. Councilwoman Dillon.
That was good.
Or Councilwoman Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is also an honor to be mistaken for Janet Dillon, but it's true. It's late. So I guess my hope is that we can try something new for this project, because I think I haven't been on council for the full time of this arc, but it seems like things kind of keep happening. And my wish for Christmas is that we could, as the city, be in charge of the sidewalk, that our city officials look at bids, look at coordination, because it just feels like too many times the ball has been dropped. That might not be the answer. I'm eager to hear what my peers think on the podium. I guess and as far as some other aspects of your discussion, I'm interested in the document. I don't think I've seen that you talked about was distributed regarding maintenance. And I may have started that pig in a poke, because I said casually, oh, our homeowners has a service that clears sidewalks around parts of the subdivision, like mailboxes, and we clear a certain part from the last house to where the city property. And I think our neighborhood does itself also clear up to a city-maintained bridge. So our homeowners association does pay for sidewalk going a little bit outside our neighborhood. I don't have experience with other homeowners associations. I understand that this is a surprise for the people currently living there. and, you know, it's good to say, I want a sidewalk, but it's always good to say, but what happens after that? And I think that the homeowners association needs to bear some of that responsibility because somebody has to do it somewhere. And you know, we bear responsibility because here we are since 2002. So we're all not perhaps shining brightly. I think that's all I have at this point, but I'm interested in hearing what other folks at the dais think about having this. I guess it was specifically because of costs. They were concerned about costs and how the costing was done. And I don't want to put city money into a position where we don't have control or oversight of costs. Thank you.
And as I mentioned, I am actively considering and exploring options for a change in oversight and management. I can also confirm, I think this is pretty likely, that based upon the redesign that was submitted and then reviewed by the Washtenaw County Road Commission, I think it is a very high likelihood that the cost of this project will exceed what was previously estimated. So that's just another component of this particular initiative. But as I said, I hope to know more from Mr. Shipman and his associates by the end of this week at the very latest.
Sure.
And I will provide that information to City Council, to staff, and to those residents of Huntington Woods who I have contact information for. I'll certainly communicate through their HOA president.
So then, may I ask one more question?
Please.
About this project? The section along Adient, is it a pie-in-the-sky dream that we could cooperate with Adient? And I know there's a hydrant and a moving the hydrant issue, but is it possible that we could look at that as all kind of one chunk?
I think it is a
coordinate?
possibility. I think it is a possibility.
Christmas.
Now,
Christmas
how
does come
likely of a
true.
possibility, I don't know. But
Right.
It's certainly a possibility, and certainly a subject we could engage all stakeholders on.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, if there's nothing further to be brought up under the discussion portion of tonight's agenda, and it appears there are not, we come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who'd like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Years ago, we have always had pride on our infrastructure. Now, in the last years, we find out that our sewer plant is pretty well crapped out. And our water towers, it appears the last time the water tower was painted was when I was on council. When we talk about $28,000 for the plan, does that mean for one water tower? And then the $28,000 comes back again to do the plan for the second water tower? I think I heard that we have $175,000 in the water fund. And there was a possibility of $100,000 to paint and clean the tank water tower. Is that per water tower? So does that mean it'll be another $100,000 when we do the second one? And when is that planned? Over 15 years is sad. It appears that when American Soy had a concern, we jumped to it. But there are people that are concerned with water problems. In fact, many people are buying bottled water because they have concerns with the water. And we're going, well, we may be. I think it's, with the taxes that are being paid, I think it's important that the council do health, safety, and welfare. And that is water and sewer. And I think there should be a plan. When we have an estimate of $28,000 to do a plan, we also got notified that the county wanted, what, $50,000 to do a roundabout for plan, and now it's turned into $100,000? It's scary as a taxpayer. to say, well, roundabout, and it's an estimate and estimates. I think that it's important that the taxpayers be notified before things turn into something else of the history. I have asked on a couple occasions, when was the last time our water towers were painted? And I have, well, about 15, I have yet to know exactly. Another comment is on the Thorncrest Apartments. Apparently, people drive through and they are mentioning that appears to be a dump. And I think it's important that maybe the city makes some kind of acknowledgement or on the mayor's behalf what is going on there and the improvements being done.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Appreciate your
Oh,
comments.
is my 3 minutes up already?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
What about the 425 and the 50 years when it goes back to Pittsfield?
I have the slightest idea what that meant. Are there additional citizen comments?
Again, my name is Jim Olzak. I live at 374 Huntington Drive, and Cheryl Gervin talked earlier about the speeding in our subdivision. And it's basically phase 2 individuals that are, they see it a straight shot, no cars or no kids in the morning or in the afternoon, and they go speeding down just to get down to Macon. I hate to see what's going to happen when phase 3 starts, because it's going to be even further away. And there's basically only 2 ways in, Arlington and Huntington. People are going to take Huntington because that's where the mailboxes are for phase 2. So, I know our police force is limited, but I think if there was maybe in the morning when it's dark, have a cop car out there, light up a few people, it gets on Facebook, that might help. The other comment I want to make is also about the sidewalks. Again, I moved in 2003. It's been 16 years, and I believe the Planning Commission approved twice this sidewalk, and it's fell through the cracks twice, okay? So I understand the city doesn't want to be responsible, that the homeowner should be, but again, this was an agreement between the city and Dave Shipman, okay? So why the homeowners should bear the cost of this sidewalk, I can't really understand.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Are there additional comments, additional public comments this evening? Well, let me try to address some of those. With respect, Mrs. Hess, I have absolutely no idea what the comment was at the end about 425 with Pittsfield Township. If you'd like to talk to me after the meeting, I'd be happy to try and better understand your concerns. The water tower, as Mr. Wygowski indicated, the industrial park water tower was last painted 15 years ago. That seems to be the industry standard in terms of how long paint and decals last on a piece of infrastructure of that type. Your other questions were regarding water quality, regardless of whether it's a industrial business, commercial enterprise, or private citizen. We take water quality very seriously, and if people experience poor water quality, I would encourage them to immediately contact the Department of Public Works and request that somebody come out to their property or place of business to inspect. To the gentleman who commented about speeding, we appreciate those remarks. I know that Chief Hart and the police department for several months, probably about a year and a half ago now, had officers in Huntington Woods on multiple times during each shift. Perhaps we need to do that again. Certainly, he's not looking at me at the moment, but I know Chief Hart will talk to his officers about that. Very good. We'll follow up on that. And indeed, you're correct. As I stated in my remarks maybe 5-10 minutes ago, 17 years for a sidewalk is far too long to wait. And so that's why I'm considering a variety of different options to expedite this project and to get it done. And I'll certainly continue to proactively communicate with you and your neighbors and your HOA leadership. Whether I have good news or bad, I'll try my best, well, I will do my best to proactively communicate and provide you the information you require. If there's no additional business to come before City Council this evening, please note our upcoming work meetings and regular meetings. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:39 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by, was that Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.